Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the AI Marketing Stacks podcast. And here I'm with the illustrious guest, Mr. Joey Vaillancourt, who is the head of partnerships at Biooptimizers, which is an amazing health company that's doing all kinds of cool things with influencer marketing, direct response marketing. They have some amazing funnels and amazing products. And he's also the host of Partner Up Profits, which I'm sure he'll talk about a little here. And Joey, just thanks for being on the show.
Yeah, happy to be here.
Awesome. First thing I want to ask you is, what are you working on right now that has you the most excited?
Oh, there's so many things. There's the podcast, obviously. There's the building $100 million partnership team vision for the 10-year plan. Like we're strategizing as a team, as a company to become $1 billion brand, but really owning in for our partnerships team on how we can get to the $100 million mark as our department. So those are the big things. And then, of course, AI, just how to implement this strategically so that everyone's using it, we're maximizing it, and we're being dynamic in how we integrate it with the company.
Awesome. Yeah, and I want to talk to you about the systems thinking that you use to integrate with AI, because prior to the show, we were talking about how you have tons of AI tools, but those are always changing. What doesn't change is the systems that you use to plug in those tools and the way that you're thinking about how to use them. So I want to get to that in a little bit. But also, so much of what you do involves human connection, right? Like literally partnerships, whether that's through your podcast or that's through affiliates or through influencers. So how do you think about the importance of partnerships in your specific business? And then in general, like if you're in marketing, if you're in, doing direct response, like how important are partnerships? How do you think about them?
It's a great question. So I've made a living off of creating partnership programs at scale for companies. And then I've helped clients become strategists on how to do it for their own business. The way I look at a partnership department, there's a couple different goals that you could set for yourself. One is products get sold by affiliates, brands get built by influencers. That's a big one, right? Like you take a product-based company, you start adding ambassadors, UGC content, and people promoting it organically. You start to create a lifestyle brand around the product-based company, like an e-com base. So I'd say it's the quickest and fastest way to become a brand and not just a product. So that's on one side. If that's of interest to you, of course, there's dividends with like revenue coming from that as well. But then it's a really good profit zone program to open up. When you're paying commissions as opposed to like paying really high rates on whether it's ads or other areas of paid media, even if there are some affiliates you're going to be paying, there's a large percentage of those people are going to be paying on commission. So it just gives you a good revenue stream for anything you already have going on. And you can still continue to do your Amazon store without affiliates. You can still do all your other, mediums of advertising. But I just look at like partnerships as fuel to the fire for your business.
Yeah, I love that. And how do you can you give me some examples of some of the partnerships that you have right now, either with Biooptimizers or yourself?
Yeah. So we started as like, we had a couple SKUs back in 2015. We had 5 people in the company and we were traditionally a direct response company, meaning we had direct response, email affiliates, maybe some people doing a couple Facebook ads and things like that, although we didn't allow trademark bidding. But we had like one channel of partnerships and it was pretty much faceless email list affiliates, which was great. And to this day, it still plays a part in our ecosystem. From 2015 to around 2018, our visionary and CEO, Matt Gallant from Biooptimizers, started to say, let's start to go into podcast advertising, which I didn't know what a podcast really was back then. It was still new to me. And I was just like, okay, whatever, ads, we'll figure it out. We'll make it work. So I went deep down the rabbit hole of how to advertise with podcasts. And you might be thinking like, is that really an affiliate play? And it is. I think of partnerships as like anything that we're paying another person to speak on our behalf for that's driving sales to our business. So podcast became the second channel we opened. That went really well. Then we started to do social posting with influencers. Then we did UGCs, we did ads, we did sponsored newsletters from these influencers. Then we moved into YouTube content creators. And again, they're all driving sales based on an affiliate model. So we went from like a single channel to, an omni-channel partnerships department that, serves anywhere from 8 to 10 partnership avatars, as I like to call them.
Awesome. Who are some of the partners or influencers that you guys are working with?
So the first claim to fame influencer, which it took us like 6 months to get.
Mm,
Uh, like it's not an easy climb at the start because nobody knows you. And I've got some tactical things that, I'd recommend everyone do that we didn't do initially. I made a lot of dumb mistakes, and that's just part of the testing process and like opportunity to level up. But Dave Asprey was our first, like, Bulletproof Radio. That podcast changed the game for us.
mm,
And we were outreaching him manually, and it was just me. When I say we, I was a team of one. We've since then built a big team up, but I was outreaching, like the manual approach, sending an email here and there, DMing, and then I had something called Pitchbox, which is, I have no affiliation to Pitchbox. I just think that they're a great company and doing like mass outreach blasts to different groups of people we had targeted. 6 months later, we landed Dave Asprey's show. They allowed us to go onto it. They liked the products, and we started to advertise. And that was like a huge catalyst of sales, but also an opportunity for partners to see us and recognize us as a different level of brand and product emerging in the market, which then opened up doors to new opportunities and new partnerships. And it wasn't easy, but it got a little bit easier as we started to, accrue more ambassadors and content creators behind us. But we work with Dave Asprey, Ben Greenfield, Dr. Mark Hyman, a lot of the biohacker markets, like our primary avatar. And then we got into now we're working with like satirical content creators like JP Sears, and some political people, which we have no affiliation to, politics. We just look at it as like, hey, it's a source of traffic.
mm-hmm.
We don't buy into like whatever they're supporting. It's like, if we can get traffic, we get traffic. But yeah, biohackers were like our bread and butter for a long time, and we're starting to branch off into more mainstream. But those are some of the big names.
It's amazing. What are some of those tactical lessons that you learn in trying to get big influencers like a Dave Asprey or a Ben Greenfield?
Oh man. So the top three mistakes people usually make, including myself, was like, I chased the big dogs right out of the gate. I looked at vanity metrics, like how many followers that they have, like, targeted Kardashian or something. Like, I've got to get that. It's going to change the business. When really it comes down to the micro-influencers. I think that I'd
Mm,
focus more on micro niche influencers. Look at your customer database, especially if you've been an established company for many years. There are people within your ecosystem who are probably great influencers already. And this is like more of a customer referral program, but you got to look at it as like a source of influencer strategy as well, because some of these people might have 10,000s of followers that have a really good engagement rate that could actually, become a really good influencer affiliate for your brand. And then contrary to that is, if someone doesn't have a large following, they might still be telling a story that's unique to them, that provides you a customer avatar you haven't even thought of for your business. And this is great when people are giving you ideas and stories based on their own experience taking your product, and you take that and you create a new avatar, or you take that UGC and you put it on your site, and all of a sudden you're getting optimizations on your front end page, your back end customer pages, whatever you can use that asset in, provided you have licensing to those assets.
mm.
But it just opens up a whole world beyond having to go and pay high ticket prices for an influencer who may or may not successfully promote your brand with the KPI you're looking for, if that makes sense.
100%. So you're saying start with your own customer list
Yeah.
as the first place for micro influencers.
If you've got Shopify, there's an integration. I forget what it's called, but there's search it. It's basically, it'll identify everyone in your database and it'll find their follower accounts.
Mm,
It's a quick integration you can install. I think it's actually free, and I would just target them. You know what I mean? Target the ones who you'd assume aren't going to, like, if there's somebody with 50,000 followers, it might be a paid deal. At that point, I'd lower the threshold a little bit, but look in your current database, find them, make them the stars of the show. Plus they're like probably your super fans of your products at that point, if they've been around for long enough to be recognized in your system, and ask them, can we use your assets? Can we use your testimonials? Like, there's so much rotting fruit on the ground in a business that people aren't even tapping into, but they're always so focused on like getting, The Rock or like these big influencers to promote their brand, when really micro influencers are going to do the majority of work harder for you, and stick around longer.
yeah, I love that. So if, let's say, for example, you had that integration or you have some other sort of process to be like, okay, here's my customers, here's the following, they have a unique story, a unique testimonial. What's the next step in order to like, A, empower them to be good ambassadors for your brand, and B, incentivize them to want to be like, the best cheerleaders for your product or for your brand or for your story?
Yeah, so it comes down to tiers. Like, I usually look at a 5-tier system. So, tier 1 could be 1 million followers, tier 5 could be somebody with 5,000 followers. It's dynamic, it's subjective. You can decide, who you want to target. But I would say around 5,000 followers is a sweet spot for like a micro-influencer for a smaller brand. Now, what I'd want to do is I'd want to scour what people are already saying. So you could go to Instagram or like social platforms and search for provided you're using hashtags that are associated to your brand, find out who's already talking about you, find out if they're doing video content that is potentially useful for you as is. If you can't find that, but that's where I would start. Second to that is if you can't find it, but you find people in your customer database that you feel are the right avatar, or they've bought enough that they're willing to buy in and potentially do a product exchange rather than paying them, you could just say, hey, how about a product if you just shoot us a 60-second testimonial? And they may or may not be willing to do that for that product, or maybe it's $50, but it's probably minimal when you come down to micro-influencers. And then what I would do is you need to teach them. Assume that first off, there's two things. There's two ways I would approach it. I would ask Sally Jones as the avatar here today, who's like 30 years old using this product. Ask her, what's your interpretation of our product? And prompt her with ways that's not necessarily scripting her response, but giving her the framework to provide, these are the features, these are the benefits, this is the sub benefits, and this is the emotional component to why I'm buying this product. She doesn't have to know those like mathematical layers, but just give her a prompt. And you can use an AI for this, right? You could ask like, I want a prompt for the AIDA framework or something similar in marketing people are using. You want to get the unscripted version. Second to that is once you find a formula or you think you have a formula based on testing email swipes or something that's working in your own advertising ecosystem, give them the scripted version. Get them to do 2 versions, test that on a page, see which one does better. And maybe you'll be pleasantly surprised by the unscripted version does better. And then it's like feedback loops. Why did that work? Was it her? Was it her background? Was it the way she said it, her tone? There's so many layers to it, or maybe there's a hook. But that's really like, I know it's a lot.
That's awesome.
There, but like, there's just so much to it that people like are missing. They're looking too far ahead.
Yeah. What about some of the, like, I imagine this actually is at every single layer, right? Whether it's a micro influencer or a big influencer, that a lot of this, like the partnership is a relationship and you have to nurture the relationship and keep up with that relationship. So what are some of the lessons, either mistakes that you had or things that you've learned to help to like manage those relationships? Speaking to like the interpersonal side, I guess.
Yeah. So with regards to the phases of partnerships, there's typically like 4 phases of a partnership that I look at. There's like phase 1, which is the architecting, who you're going to target, what you're going to say to them, what your program's defined as, how you're incentivizing them. Like, based on your margins, your business, you need to figure all this stuff out because it can also be different from an affiliate program as a direct response. There's sometimes I've seen programs give out like 100% commissions to like some affiliates because they know they make up on the back end for it. Influencers, you can actually go the opposite route. You can pay them a lot less of a commission, provided you're continuing to give them product. If you have a consumable, that's even better. Something that expires or something that they have to continue to get and they get value out of that. Phase 2 is like the marketing. So you're actually then planning. This is after the point you get partners into your ecosystem. They want to promote. You're giving them the marketing assets. You're planning campaigns with them, and you're kind of hand holding them throughout the process. And throughout the process, you're doing 2 things too. You've got your organic influencers who are like on your newsletter that you're running flash sales, maybe monthly campaigns that are like kind of your core marketing campaigns. Second to that is you potentially have paid influencers that, again, paid influencers aren't a bad thing. It's not, I'm just saying that, depending on your investor profile as an influencer manager or as a company, you may not want to do paid right away. But for the paid side, it's independent of time. And you can offer exclusivity on like some particular promotions you want to run only with paid media influencers. Third component of that, and we're getting like to the retention side and like the scaling phase of this, is test it, see what works. And then you're going to go into, okay, well, this person's doing really well. I want to keep them. I want to scale them. And then you're going to go back and you're going to offer phase 4, which is the scaling and ascension of influencers and partners, where maybe you tested a podcast ad. Now you're going to test a social post. You're going to do a sponsored email. You're going to do a YouTube video, and you're going to continue to do omni-channel deals with this person. And the goal with a paid influencer is to negotiate down to a hybrid deal. You want to get to the point, and this is where you start to separate like who wants to be part of your mission versus just wants to cash a paycheck. So I look at this as like after 6 months, if we're not necessarily at a profit zone, I'll explain that to the partner and say, listen, like I want to make this work. I think it's in our best interest to make this a long-term partnership. As you can see, the ROI just doesn't make sense for us. Can we do a hybrid deal? And most of the time when they're mission-based influencers, they see value in that because it's less work for them long-term to work with one company rather than shop around every single month for a new company. That covers like the 4 phases. I think on the retention side is like, we constantly have engagement metrics and factors at play where if somebody made X amount of sales every 3 months, we give them free product. And if they make more sales, they get more free product. We run recognition awards every year for partners that have been with us for a long time. We're checking in with them to see how we're doing. We're giving them reasons to promote. We're giving them playbooks on what we know works based on marketing we've seen that's been successful in our business. Because as a content creator or as an influencer, you run out of ideas. Like people are starving for ideas on how to promote your product. And you just take for granted that, oh, I've got 12 campaign ideas. How come they're not doing that? So you got to really communicate. And I think that that's the big valuable piece that you can offer is create the ideas for them and give them reasons to promote longer term.
Yeah. And when you think about, but when I sit and think about influencers, it seems like there's just more and more influencers every day, right? And I don't know what the study was that they did where they like asked kids like, hey, you know, do you want to be an astronaut? Do you want to be a firefighter when you grow up? And so many people said, no, I want to be an influencer, right? So there's a proliferation of influencers. Like social media has, you know, a chokehold on culture, right? As far as where people get their information from, like even, you know, TikTok is one of the biggest search engines. What do you think about the future of influencer marketing, the future, like how important it is versus other channels, how it will change in the coming years? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah. I mean, prices are going up. I think that we're going to see not a flattening of the curve, but I think that the days of like paying for non-credible endorsements is going to continue to dwindle away. And again, I go back to like micro-influencers. There's so much value in a person that's hungry, a person that's new to this, that comes in with like, again, 10,000 followers. If you have a group of 100 influencers, all who have 10,000 followers or less each, like that's an amazing program, you know, and that's where I just see the trend going. And that's where I continue to look at. And here's a big thing that I'm tuned into a lot because we like, you know, we get to do so many tests and we have so many partners of different spectrums. And they're all amazing at what they do. But to your point, like, where is it going? In my opinion, you need to find the talent that's coming up. You need to find the diamonds in the rough before they get discovered or before they sign that first deal. And I think that there's some definite ways that we've started to look at things. And I think that, you know, again, I'm thinking of AI all the time. Like, how can I use AI to identify these people before anyone else does? But there's a couple of ways, like, you know, think about podcasts. There's often podcast ranking sites. And, you know, what I'm doing with the teams is like looking at the podcast ranking, who's coming up in the top 100 ranking for a marketing, if that's my primary customer or marketing or partnership avatar. Okay. If someone climbs into, like, sneaks into the top 100, well, they just got there, right? So they're probably new to the space. So I'm going to try to get in contact with them rather than the person on top. The person on top's always going to be a long-term, you know, potential, but ultimately the diamonds in the rough, that's where you can make a wicked deal. You can lock in rates potentially, because like you could say, hey, I want to invest in you for like the next 12 months. And this might be their first like deal. So they're really valuing this. And you know, they're on the uptrend, right? They might have 10,000 followers today on like YouTube subscribers, but maybe they've acquired 5,000 in the last 30 days. So if you just look at the vanity metrics of, oh, they have follower count of only 10,000, who cares? Versus what's their growth rate? That's who I think you need to start targeting more and more for partnerships rather than going after the people that have already kind of made it and they're on the other side.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Can we dig down a little bit more into that? Like, are there any other quantifiable metrics that you look at to be like, wow, this person is this is a rising star, or any sort of like, you know, just qualities that you recognize where you're like, oh, this person has potential, like this is a diamond in the rough. Because I feel like, to your point, that's an amazing ability and skill to have, to be able to recognize that.
Yeah, there's, I feel like I'm giving away secrets that I shouldn't be, but there's a lot of ways that I'm continuing to think down this path. And I'm not the expert, and I'm just trying to, we're all stumbling our way through these things. But one thing I'm looking at is who's showing up on shows, who's showing up on the Dave Asprey show that never was before. And again, he's not there yet, but why did Dave Asprey interview him, right? Like, why did Mark Hyman have him on the show? And is he going to be doing a big show circuit soon? Like, that's, what I'm looking for, like that. Tactical things too. Here's another way. I like to look for coaching groups. I like to look for people teaching influencers. I like to look for people who are teaching people how to rank their podcast, how to build a podcast from scratch, and setting up tier twos with these companies, because they're the ones that are identifying the talent from the beginning. They're the ones that, even if it's just day one with that person, they might be able to say, hey, I think this guy's going to make it. I'm going to keep an eye on him, and I'm going to get a commission off of this tier two referral that I set up for you guys eventually, right? So pairing yourselves with like-minded communities, teaching the right partnership avatar for your business, that's a big one. It takes a little bit more work, and you got to try to identify who that is. And it, of course, takes the person to say yes. And there's a lot of intricacies that have to happen there. But that's another one. On the YouTube front, to kind of go to a different vertical right now, think about like, I always look for people who are following the trends, but again, haven't necessarily cracked the code of follower counts or views just yet. Or maybe they did. Maybe they have one video that popped. And I look at their content. What are they creating? Are they good content creators? And again, like, you just have to have an eye for this. It's something you have to get trained on. But I can just instantly recognize somebody who's got great content, and I know they're going to make it long term, but right now they only have like 5 videos. So it's a bit of trial and error. And when it comes to Instagram, and I'm not big on TikTok, and I'm not big on LinkedIn, so I'm not going to pretend I am, but I think that the framework stays the same. Vanity metrics is one source of truth. It's not the only source of truth. What's their engagement rate? What's their average likes per post over the last 9 posts, 9 videos? Like defining what the growth trajectory is. And then if you want to go deeper, there's some softwares like that I've invested in. It's like $10 a month, I think, for flanks.com, which is PHLANX.com. No affiliation to it. And there's probably 10 other ones that are better, but literally it'll tell you where their audience is. Like if I look at somebody as an Instagrammer, I'll say, okay, well, great. Now, like they have 500,000 followers. Where is their demographic? Is that the right customer demographic for us or not? And sometimes it'd be like all India followers, which tells you a different story. It could be bot followers, whatever the case is. But there's so many more metrics you have to look at and filter through to understand the full story beyond just looking at them and saying, gut feeling, I think it's good or not. I think that there's a lot of like frameworks we've put together and calculators that mitigate the risk to some degree. But ultimately, it's testing and feedback loops and figuring out if that's working or not as an ROI line.
Awesome. Well, sorry to make you give up some of the secret sauce, but luckily this podcast is pretty small, so your secrets are safe for now. But that's genius what you said about the coaching groups. That's very, very smart. And then looking at the podcast circuits, right? And kind of almost like crowdsourcing, right? Yeah. Well, if this person is recognizing something and this person is recognizing something, chances are there's something that's happening here. So that's really, really powerful. Thanks for sharing that. I want to pivot a little bit and talk about AI and talk about how you use it in your business. Before this call, you talked about the fact that, like I mentioned, yes, you like tools, and there's plenty of tools, and I'd love to hear what you're using and how you're using them. But I also want to talk more about the systems, the way you think about creating systems and workflows and everything else so that you can fit in these AI tools in a way that actually is effective for your business. So can you speak a little bit more about like how you think about systems and their interaction with AI?
Yeah, absolutely. Go on the record, I'm not an AI expert, and nor is anybody at this point. So if anybody claims that, please run away. For the most part, I think it's a dynamic, always evolving thing. And I think there will become experts at how to navigate AI, which is really what, I look at myself as. I'm a navigator, and, I'm going out charting a course, what I think is going to work for my company. And to your point, the strategy is more important than the actual thing you're using. Everything could change overnight, but it's how you use a system that's most effective. So I wrote up a little bit on a notepad here. I went back to the 90s and just pen and paper. So I look at my day, I look at my week, I look at my overall team. What are we doing on a daily basis? Okay. So I make a list, and that could be anything, depends on your business. Is there a system for that thing today? And does there need to be? So, I'll walk through maybe an example as we walk through the system that I'm using. So for me, recently, I've had to think about the team's alignment for next year for 2024. I have to do some team planning, right? I don't currently have a system for them to use an AI prompt system to give me feedback on what worked this year and what didn't work this year. So now I'm saying, okay, well, I need to create a system for that. And then I need to implement AI into that system to make it easier for them to compile that info and get it to me, and then put it into AI so that AI tells me the comprehensive overview and summary of all those issues my team had and what their plans are for next year. So my simple system is, what did I do today? Is there a system that exists today? If not, I need to create one first. Like, I need to actually do the work or ask AI. I'm doing this one thing every single day. What's the system? So use AI to create your own system. Mm-hmm. Easy. Document it. And then I would say, is there an automation that I could implement with this system that doesn't even require me to do this? I just ask AI to, like, is there an automation to handle my inbox? They might recommend it, or they might give you tactical things like hire an EA, hire a VA, right? Then I'll create a prompt if there's a prompt to be created. I'll test the prompt, because as we know, like, prompts they sound good on paper, then you put them in and it's like, oh wait, that's not what I wanted. So I'll make sure to test it, refine it as much as possible. And then, provided it gives me the outcome I want, I'll put it into the system at that point as like a documented process for the teams to use. That's a key thing. Like, discipline creates freedom, and systems create freedom for you to start to hire and delegate tasks no matter what you're doing. And, I heard something before. It was like, if you're not replaceable, you're not promotable. Like, that's a big one. Mm-hmm. So you need to be able to kind of document this stuff, create feedback loops, and tune back into it. Like, is it working? Is it producing the outcome you want or not? And refine the prompt system. And if you can, like, there's actual AI builders out there that you can use to build that system you just created in-house for your team. If you can build that and create it as an actual like template software thing that auto integrates with an AI, even better. So I don't know if that answers the question on the system, but I can give some like strategies now on how I use that too.
Sure. Yeah, 100%. Before we go into those strategies, if we zoom out big picture, and you're thinking about your team and you're thinking about yourself and how to prepare for, all the changes that AI has already created and will continue to create, what are some of the principles or the frameworks that you use just to think about it in general, setting yourself up for success in an AI world?
I don't want to be tied to any one system or one AI. I think that's rule number one, is don't get bogged down by like, oh, use Bard or use ChatGPT. Like, use the one that's most effective, but don't waste a lot of time on like, testing 20 different platforms. Like, I could probably use ChatGPT. I think it's the power of the prompt. Get really good at prompting, and regardless of what you're using, yeah, there might be a better one. I'm not here to say that there's not a better one, but the point is, I think it's just like, it's more mental stimulation than anything. You're just trying, like, you get addicted to these types of things, right? So I'm looking at really solidifying the prompt, learning how other people are prompting more effectively. And there's like pre-prompting you do to get the most effective outcome from a prompt that I'm noticing, right? Like, I used to, like, very simple. I used to say, give me a marketing campaign for this influencer for this product. That was good, but like level 2 to that, and again, I'm still like nowhere near an expert. I'm just starting with this, but it's like, tell it what it is first. You are an influencer marketing manager with 20 years experience. You are an expert in this. And I need you to be an expert today in developing this to produce this outcome at this rate with this many, like, really get specific with the prompts and the systems you're using. And again, I think the feedback loop is the most important part of all of this thing, like measuring your prompt success, coming back and judging whether or not that was good or not, and continuing to learn from others. I think that's my main framework, is just feedback loops, refining systems, and building new ones.
Nice. So what are some of the automations or strategies or prompts that you're using that you're most proud of or have been the most effective for you?
Okay, this is a fun one because I literally just did this the past 4 weeks as people were prepping for Black Friday. My team was, but I was really head down trying to strategize on things. The hardest thing is like I could just do a lot of the work. The hard part is to pull yourself away and say, no, I'm going to develop a prompt system for this because I'm going to do this again and again.
Mm.
So it's like, it could take me 2 hours to actually just do the work, but it's going to take me 4 hours to do the work once. That's going to save me that 2 hours compounded over years, potentially. So that's the way I try to approach it. And it's hard because if you're trying to get a bunch of stuff done in a day, you don't want to take the extra time to build something extra. So you got to really evaluate if it's worth your time. And in this case, it was like the 2024 strategy for the team, which I know we're going to do every single year, every quarter. And I just thought, what a great opportunity to settle down and build something. So here are the things that I built. First off, AI is like a free consultant. Okay. Like you don't have to hire somebody to go get the opinion, and it's non-biased and it doesn't judge you. So you can ask like dumb questions. You can just see what it says. Like if you're afraid to ask something in public, a company setting, go and like, incognito chat with your GPT guy and see what he says. And it's like, it's just a friend. It's a consultant guy you can consult with. So that's the way I look at it. And some of the exercises that I wanted to develop was like, every quarter and every month, depending on like if you're managing teams or yourself. This doesn't have to be team related, although I'm talking about teams today. But like there's a SWOT exercise, right? Strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats in your business. That's not a new concept, but you can take that and now say, I'm going to now develop a prompt to say, take all these strengths I've just listed, take all these weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. Give me the things that I should be focused on next year, the top 3 things that will solve this and combine all this into a wonderful harmony of, like you're solving my problems for me. That's not the prompt I gave, but like I designed a really good prompt that takes that all into account. I'll give that to each of my team members, ask them to do that same SWOT exercise with that prompt and give me back the feedback. I'll get my EA to then take all that information, give her another prompt to say, this is what my teams gave as my SWOT analysis. Now give me, the team leader, what I should do to support them in everything they've just given me. So that's like one exercise that's super powerful. The other one I like to do, I'm a big thinker. Like I take 60 minutes a week when I can. With kids now, it's not as much as I'd like to. So I'll like talk a big game, but I don't do it as much. But I used to take 60 minutes and I would just think. Literally no computers, no devices, pen and paper, one question. I would just strategy and think, like let, free flowing thought come out. I would think about assumptions. What assumptions have I made this past year that didn't work out that I thought would work out last year? What are assumptions I made that did work out and why did they work out? So I'm thinking of this in my head oftentimes. Now what I do the same thing with ChatGPT or whatever prompt system I want. And I'll say, I made these assumptions last year. I thought it would do X. It did Y. Why is that? Get out of my own way. Ask them to solve that for me or give them a unique perspective on that problem or that situation to just challenge the assumptions. And then second to that, it's like, what do I think is going to happen next year in my business or in life? Like, I think if I do this, it's going to equate to that. What are possible alternatives that I'm not considering? And then it'll list a bunch of stuff for you. So it's like lateral thinking, and it opens up unique parallel universes you haven't even thought of. I know it's like kind of woo-woo sounding, but it's a great feedback system to just have these really open-ended, expansive questions to kind of include in your planning for whatever you're taking on, whether it's business or personal, and then challenging assumptions you've made that didn't have the outcome you want.
I think what you said is so powerful, and I have a bunch of follow-up questions and thoughts. But first, could you I've heard you say this twice. Can you define what lateral thinking is and why that's an important concept for you for someone who doesn't know?
Yeah. So I'm not a pessimist, I don't think. Like people might call me sometimes like, you're like, Joey, you always find the worst in the situation. But I'm like, but I also find the best. Like, but I laterally think about every possible outcome that could happen. It's like when I'm in a room with people, like, and I think some people maybe just like are born with this more. Like I'm an internalizer. I think a lot. I'm an introvert. So maybe this is unique to me, but this is why it's so important that if you don't think this way, to get out of your own way, of your own biases as to like what your narrow focus is, and start thinking laterally. What are all the other alternatives to what this outcome might be? I think that if I hire 3 people next year to become copywriters on my team, that they're going to triple my business. Why would that work? Give me 3 reasons. And why would that potentially not work? And what else should I consider? That's lateral thinking. It's across the board, considering all possibilities and then weighing the options and making a decision. Like, you got to make a decision. So it's not like you just sit there in paralysis of analysis. But I think that, for myself, I need that feedback system. And I don't want to talk to my wife about it. I don't want to always talk to my teams because they're so close to it. Sometimes they can't even help me. So, one of the things that I've been asking, I talked to you about, I think before the call, was like, I wanted to develop the vision of the $100 million partnerships department. And, it's not the greatest thing. I tried the prompt system. It doesn't exactly give me what I want, but it gives me open-ended loops to start asking new questions of things I wasn't considering. That's really what lateral thinking is, right? You can't do that always by yourself.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. And actually, one of the themes that I've had talking with you and talking with other people on this podcast is that people are really at the top of their game. One of the biggest use cases that they use for ChatGPT literally comes down to questions. Yeah. They'll either ask ChatGPT to ask me questions, which is something I've stolen, right? Like, only ask me questions until you understand this, or until, like, just only ask me questions. Or you ask it questions. And it seems very basic and very subtle, what you just said, like having a conversation. But I think one of the most powerful things about these models is, like, you can one, be dumb, right? I'll even say sometimes I'm like, sorry, I'm really dumb at this. Like, I'm just going to ask the dumbest questions you've ever heard until you give me answers. But it also allows you to connect really disparate things, right? So I've had conversations with ChatGPT where I'm like, here's how I'm structuring these. Here are these ad hooks, right? Like, what's in common about these ad hooks, right? Like, boil it down to first principles for me. Okay, let's go deeper, boil it down. Okay, look at it from a biology perspective, right? Look at it from a cognitive science perspective. What cognitive biases are here? Like, give me a framework that I could use to analyze if a hook is going to work, and give me a framework I can use to generate new hooks, right? And, like, almost thinking about it like a scientist, like digging deep into concepts and saying, look at it from this perspective. Like you said, like, a SWOT analysis has been around for a long time, but now you're using that with the tool. Somebody else on another podcast was talking about, I forgot the exact concept, but it was a concept from, like, manufacturing in the 80s. And he's like, let me use this and apply it to my business. And I think those people who are blending totally different fields that typically are siloed are going to get amazing, amazing results in their own thinking, and then also in the outputs from these models.
Yeah. I mean, there's so much to unpack. And one thing you said that we've done is, if you're the expert already in this, you could say, build this campaign brief based on this influencer type, based on this product. We just talked about that. The second thing is to, like, transcribe a winning campaign that you came across from another company. So literally take their ad, get it transcribed, and then say, explain to me why this works. Use marketing lingo or, like, language frameworks, but break it down to just not what they're saying, but, like, how they said it and the timing. And you know what I mean? You can really just use that to start giving feedback to your teams right away in real time. And it's the more creative you can get with it. But I like the approach too of, like, thinking of what are the strategies from, I don't know, a car manufacturing company like Ford that can be applied to today's modern business of this e-com site that I'm working at, or, just, like, getting creative. And that's how you come up with unique ideas, right? Like, there's, so many trends happening, but how do trends get set? I think it's people with unique ideas and these other prompts that you can combine with that. That's how you're going to start to spur new ideas too. It's like taking from the old and combining with the new.
Yeah, 100%. And one person I follow on this, who I think is really lucid in thinking about AI and marketing, is Perry Marshall. And one concept that he talks a lot about, he's brilliant. One concept he talks about is, like, finding the edge. So if you look at how these large language models were trained, they're trained on a lot of, like, I'm going to say, like, basically average content, right? It's trained on a lot of stuff. If you imagine sort of like a probability distribution, it's trained on a lot of the stuff in the middle. But as you go farther out into the tails of knowledge, like very, very specific domain knowledge, it has less data to use. So it starts to sort of trail off. And one concept that he talks about is, like, find the edge of knowledge, like find where these large language models start to sort of fall off, right? Ask questions that have never been asked before. Like, make that your goal. Like try to ask a question that's never been asked in the history of humankind and see what comes up. Because he says those little pockets where ChatGPT, its domain knowledge is very limited, that's where you can create opportunity, is finding all of those pockets. And I thought that was such a powerful framework that I've used to adopt, right? Like, what are the most powerful questions I can ask?
Interesting. I like that a lot. And so here's my experience. It's been very hard to start using AI because you're almost like conditioned that you can't ask the impossible. You know what I mean? Like you should be able to ask the impossible. This is the time. This is now. Like ask the most, impossible questions you can. But I found myself limiting my thinking or limiting my capacity of asking because it's like it'll never know that because like my little brain, my subconscious is like limiting that factor. And I think that you need to remind yourself that this thing is capable of way more things than we're ever potentially capable of ourselves.
Yeah.
Like it's an amazingly powerful tool. And I love the edge thinking on the questioning.
Yeah, it is amazingly powerful. And this actually will transition to somewhere I wanted to take the conversation, which is, one of the limiting factors, I think, on using these tools is the human imagination, right? So it's not, a lot of times it's not that the AI is limited or the technology is limited. At this point, it's now our own imagination, right? What artificial constraints that we put on ourselves. I was thinking about something from the Elon Musk biography the other day. And he says, one of his big principles is challenging every assumption. The only rules are the laws of physics. Everything else is just recommendations. I think it's a really powerful framework. You also, I'm going to read some things from your website here because I think a lot of this is in line. These are what you call your 5 forward momentum missions. One of them, the number 1 is empower you to create a better life by thinking differently. It says, I made a lot of mistakes in my life. I'm not perfect, but what I have gotten good at is applying introspection strategies so I don't repeat the same mistakes and make better decisions moving forward. Powerful questions lead to unique solutions. So my question for you is, what are some of those powerful questions that you ask yourself or you recommend that other people ask themselves to uncover those assumptions, those blockages, those limiting beliefs that they're operating in?
When you're reading that, I was like, did I write that? I need AI. Man, I don't know. Like that's a deep question. I think that there's a great book, and I'm not the author of this book, but I wish I was. It's called The Road Less Stupid by Keith J. Cunningham. And whoever doesn't have that, I just think it's a great audible book you don't want to read it in like one sitting. It's really like an inspirational, go back to it when you need that thinking strategy session. But I could actually maybe send the group. There's a thinking strategy session I put together on this topic where it's like the 60-minute framework on how to sit with a question, challenge assumptions, go through the process. And ultimately, it is a process. It's an exercise you need to do. You need to practice it. It's like a muscle. You need to train it because no one's sitting around for 60 minutes staring at a wall or staring out at the water anymore and just like letting free flowing imagination and thoughts come to mind. Everyone's got to be busy. They got to, take a note. They got to answer. It's like, so I think that there's one of the big skills people are going to have, and it's not answering your question just yet, but it's like consistency and allowing yourself to be bored in some moments, because some of the greatest ideas come from just when you're thinking about nothing, looking at nothing, not distracted by anything. But here's one thing that's helped me, and I think that it doesn't answer the exact question you're talking about, the assumptions, but I just like the idea of like, what assumptions am I making in my life right now that I should reconsider? And I think it's just like, for me, I get a gut feeling now. If I go, and I'll just give you an example, like I'll go and get my oil changed in my car, and like my gut, I'm like, why are you getting your oil changed? Like, what are you doing? Like, this isn't something you should do. You should be able to kind of delegate or get this. So that doesn't sit right with me. But if you don't have that yet, then it's hard to kind of tune into. But I just want to like look at everything that I'm doing. And I think maybe one way you could look at it is, what are your core values in life? What's your ultimate alignment look like? And if you don't know that, you got to start to define that from the start. Like every day, what do you really want to be doing? Who do you want to be seeing? What do you want to be serving? Like, what's your ultimate end outcome that you want? And what are you working towards? If these things aren't falling into place, you need to challenge the assumption as to why you thought they would in the first place. And like, that's universal. There's so many things you could apply that to. But what I do is I literally have power questions every single day in front of me. And these change, but it's everything from how can I serve my family and our happiness with my day today? Why am I grateful for my business? Why am I grateful for financially? Open-ended questions that both evoke gratitude as well as potentially trigger things as to what's not sitting right today, in this day, in this moment, in my gut. And the more I do that, the more I can tune into that. So that's my method. I don't know if that actually adds up to anything people can use, but it's a repetition system for sure.
No, that's really powerful. That's really, really powerful. Well, Joe, I have a million questions I could continue to ask you, but I want to be respectful of your time. So where can people find more about you and find out more about what you're up to?
Yeah, the easiest way is partnerprofits.com. That's like the central hub for training everyone from marketing managers to digital marketing agency people, et cetera, mostly on partnership marketing. So if you're interested in getting into that or just keeping up with, I do a lot of interviews on the podcast for Partner Profits, people in marketing, similar to like what we're talking about too. That's the best place.
Awesome. Cool. And we'll put that in the description as well. And I just want to say thank you again so much for coming on and sharing all your knowledge and expertise.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Awesome.